search again, and then hold again. So that's why it's very important in this Vipasana practice, as a basis for that is the shamatha practice, the practice of developing a calm, clear and focused mind. Because the more we can cultivate that, the more effective this is going to be. And then the more effective this is going to be, of course, then the more that intellectual understanding will turn into this nyam, into experience, the more that will permeate our life, and the more then that will finally come to a realization of emptiness. Now, maybe I'll leave it there. I want to talk more about realization of emptiness, but in the session after lunch, so we'll leave it till then. Any questions about any of those points?
During the meditation, it was quite convincing to me.
Convincing.
To me. The closest thing that I could say, what is me, was the observer, as you said, and that it was quite tangible that the activity of observing needs the observer and stuff to be observed, and it felt like this is the closest to what I can find if I sincerely look for what is me and being sincere and saying I have a sense of me.
Right.
You know,
But could you find the observer?
No, but I couldn't. Like the activity of observing was the thing.
So maybe the observer is something labelled on that activity.
What?
So you said you only saw the activity of observing.
I could sense the activity as the sense of me.
So maybe we can say then that the observer is something labelled on the basis of the activity of observing. That we are labelling observer based on that.
I don't know if it was a label or like if I look for the sensation of me, so this activity would be this sensation of me.
Yeah,
the activity of observing.
That's right. And of course, what we're saying here in terms of emptiness and dependency, that you can only have observer is if there's observation and the observed. All of those
then,
come together.
Can observation turn into an object of, like, being, like, I don't know, like, I didn't, never mind.
But we can understand from that you can only have an observer if there's the activity of observation and also the thing that's being observed. And likewise, you can only have observation if there's an observer and something being observed. You can only have something observed if there's observation and an observer.
Yeah.
So they all are interdependent.
Sure.
So therefore, they're not independent. They're not findable.
That's for sure. Not distinguishable.
Yeah, no, you can distinguish, but you can't find. I mean, you can distinguish agent, action, and object, but you can't separate them.
No.
So they're not findable because you can't separate them.
Okay.
I like to help her with examples or with a script from practical. I would like to help her with a practical example.
Okay.
I found out that Israel is the best place to practice these things than all Buddhism. I do it myself. So I'm a single person. I walk many times alone at night in a place like in the Kerem Ateimanim, and a lot of sites of
Dangerous places.
Dangerous places. Yes.
Dangerous places alone at night, 11 o'clock when I come back from work. And of course I have a tear gas with pepper in my pocket. Of course I hold it in my hand, but each time I have this fear, or each time that somebody approached to me and started to talk to me, and then I said, oh, now I run on my own. I practice this this, I tell it for you because you're open to feel it. I practice where is this me that I'm afraid for. Understand what I mean? I look for it. First of all, it's helped me right away. I mean, I'm not. The fear go very quick away. Also, it helped you a lot to really live it, and I do it for the past 18 years already. You understand? Whenever you fear, even when I was in Dharmstad and walked alone there, and the best thing to really give you to understand it is to take it to the everyday life. Or if somebody at work, let's say I work in a competition place, people stab you in the back all the time or something, so as soon as I get this present, I said, oh, where is this person? I so insulted. I know that I'm so insulted. And I take it every day, every hour, every experience. Even recently after the stabbing in Disney, I was walking around there and some dark person came to me. And all of a sudden I didn't feel my tear gas in my pocket. It was in my pocket. Okay, what I do? So he approached me, we are alone in the street. And he started to talk to me, then I really started walking fast because I didn't have my tear gas. But then immediately I bring it. I said, okay, who we are afraid with? That means that we shouldn't be afraid of or something. But it's helped a lot to understand reality in a very practical way from your own experience. When you get the Dharma into every day, in every hour of your life, and you look at your life for this, it's the best way to live Dharma.
Yeah, very good point, and that's something I'm going to emphasize this afternoon, is exactly this point, is particularly with this Vipassana practice of emptiness, is, maybe I'll bring it in now so it's a good point, is with any practice we do, there are two parts. Often I hear people, talking amongst themselves, and then one person says to the other one, oh, when do you do your practice? And the other person says, oh, I do it every morning at 6:30 for an hour. And I think, okay. So we can diligently meditate every morning, even an hour, but if we don't do something the rest of the day, we're not going to go anywhere, because we may do an hour of Vipasana or shamatha or mindfulness, and that's useful, but then if we jump off the cushion and run around like we normally do, then any little benefit we've got from meditation will get squashed. So we're not going to go anywhere. So it's very important that in practice, two parts: meditate to internalize and integrate. And so here with emptiness practice, we can talk about these two parts. So emptiness practice has two parts: space-like emptiness and illusory-like emptiness. Space-like emptiness is the meditation practice. So that means that, when we do this search, if we don't find, that not finding is a space-like experience. It's an absence, it's a not finding. So it's often called space-like emptiness, the meditation practice. Then if we want the emptiness practice to continue and grow, we need, in daily life, illusory-like emptiness practice.
What does it mean?
Exactly what I'm going to say now. Illusory-like emptiness practice in daily life is to see everything like an illusion, meaning that now, in daily life, of course, everything appears to exist independent of us, and there appears to be an independent me here, and we behave on that basis. And particularly, as was suggested here, is particularly in daily life when we're in a situation where we usually react either with attachment or aversion or fear or something, then this is very helpful to do. And we can do this a number of ways. Let's say there's some something pleasant that we're getting attachment to, some beautiful flowers, beautiful food, or person or something, and we find ourselves craving coming up. Then we can do this illusory-like emptiness practice. We can go, well, wow, that person or thing really looks so attractive. Where is the attractiveness in that person or thing? And we can search for the beautiful person or the beautiful flowers. Where is the beauty there in the object? And we'll come to realize there's no beauty to be found there in that person or object. And then that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's something that we are labeling based on experience, and then by attachment can drop away, and we can enjoy those pleasant things. Or if we're having an unpleasant experience, maybe someone's criticizing us, or verbally abusing us, or maybe we feel frightened about someone, same thing. Then we can turn the attention to ourselves. Where is the me that is being criticized or blamed or so forth? And then we can drop away that self-grasping. Because what happens in those situations, the self-grasping, then we often overreact, whether someone is verbally abusing us or whatever, and then the situation gets out of control. So by doing this illusory-like emptiness practice, then this self-grasping can dissipate, which means there's no target for that, which means that we won't react with anger, hatred, and so forth. And then we can simply remain in a very calm state and evaluate that situation. Do I need to do something about this? Do I need to defend myself? Do I need to run? Or can I just, what this person's saying, I can just ignore? Whatever, we can then respond in a very according way rather than reacting and suffering more. So this illusory-like emptiness practice is very important, and the more we do it, the more that will feed back into our emptiness meditation. It will support and reinforce it. And then our emptiness practice will not only directly benefit us in our daily life, but it will move forward. So this is a very good point.
Even if your teenager daughter is screaming at you like hell?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if someone's screaming at you, then you'd like to help them, yeah? But often with this self-grasping, it becomes personal to us. You know, they're screaming at me. You know, how dare they scream at me? And then we scream back, and then it gets out of control. Whereas if we can do this, we can let go of that self-grasping. It doesn't become personal, and we can say, wow, that person's really upset. They really got some problems here. Can I do something to help them? And then we try and help them, rather than reacting.
Yeah, about doing meditation, the metaphor I find is like the physical world is like dust in the dark. A metaphor.
Metaphor, the physical world is like
the physical, like
dust in the dark.
It's like dust in the dark, so you can see it's there, and the mind is like a light.
Yeah.
During the meditation, that's what
right. Yeah, sure.
And the me is like a flashlight that creates the light.
Or maybe turning the flashlight to whatever you wanted to point. Like
yeah. And
yeah.
then,
I had a strong sense.
Yeah.
I did have a strong sense of self,
right.
which I can deduct. I can't experience directly. Like every time I looked for the self, looked for the me, looked for the I didn't find it. Like looking, looking at the dust, and okay, it's not there.
Yeah.
But I deducted that there is a self because
there is a me.
It's not felt. Something I couldn't not experience.
Sure.
The lack of experience of self. You see the difference?
No.
So I was very disturbed.
Yeah.
Because and I was very focused on controlling the flashlight. Like it was.
So there's a big difference between self and me.
Okay.
Me exists.
Yeah. Okay.
Person exists. You exist.
Yeah.
This we're talking about here.
I'm talking about this, not
findable.
Yeah. So I didn't find it.
Right.
I couldn't stop being disturbed about that. I don't find it.
Why were you disturbed that you didn't find it?
Because I felt it from the experience itself, from the experience that I had, all the time I felt like, okay, I want to look at that flashlight. I feel that that's where I am.
Right.
I want to look at the flashlight, but I can't because every time I turn it.
Right. So again, I think it's back to the two extremes. Existence, non-existence. For us now, we're stuck in existence, findable, real. And so for us, for something to exist, it must be like this. And if it's not like this, it can't exist. So what we're doing here is we're understanding it's not findable, but then we're stuck. We think, well, actually that means it doesn't exist, because for us there's only two possibilities now.
Or it can be experienced, or it doesn't exist.
Yeah. So either we can find it or it doesn't exist. That's the only two possibilities we see now. So if we don't find it, for us, that implies it doesn't exist. And I think that's where you're going. So what the solution to this is to understand there's a third possibility. There's a middle way. The middle way is particularly overcoming nihilism, is the dependency. There is a me that exists. It's a dependent me. It's not findable, but it's a me that exists depending on cause and conditions. Sorry?
I get the me, I think. I feel that I understand it. But
Right.
myself.
Well, that net doesn't exist. Never has existed, cannot exist.
But why it's so disturbing?
Because that's the only me that you've identified your entire life. Intellectually, you may say, well, that's how I exist. But experientially, that's the only me that you've identified with your entire life. And now it's crumbling. It's crumbling.
What is the difference between self and me?
Self is a overinflated false sense of me. So self here is independent me.
איך אומרים בעברית self ומי? In Hebrew?
אני עצמי.
עצמי. עצמי זה self. I don't think that in Hebrew there is much word.
That's like a self-cherishing.
Self-cherishing and self and me. Maybe the self is self-cherishing or
See, this is part of the problem. Is this word self? Is that here when we talk about self-grasping, we're talking about a false sense of me. That self doesn't exist. It never has existed. We believe it exists, and that's the problem.
It's like me and mine.
No. So self here is independent me. The me that exists is dependent me. That's a dependent me that exists. The me that depends on body and mind. Independent me, or self, doesn't exist. It never has existed, cannot exist. We believe it exists, and that's the problem. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? A non-existent is the root of all of our suffering. It's crazy, isn't it? We believe in a non-existent. That's why we suffer.
What is the,
Crazy.
Is there any indication?
Any indication
that you experience the emptiness?
as opposed to spacing out or something? Or what do you mean?
I mean,
Okay.
Again, intellectually, I
Sure.
what is emptiness,
Right.
what is dependency.
Yeah. Right. In the meditation, yeah.
In the meditation,
What's the indication that we're actually experiencing emptiness in the meditation? Oh, that's the question.
Not intellectual.
Yeah. Again, it often comes down to, as a beginning point, if we start to have some fear. That's a good indication that we're touching. It's not intellectual. Fear is a good sign as a beginner. Because again, as the question over here, for us, now there's two possibilities. Either there is an independent me or there's no me. And if we search and we don't find, that for us implies there's no me at all. And then often fear starts to arise. So if you have fear arising in this meditation as a beginner, usually it's a very good sign. It means you're touching experientially on that. So if you have fear arising, you can do a couple of things. One is, of course, if you're fearing that you're going out of existence, you can say, who's having the fear? If there's no me, there can be no fear. So you're not going out of existence. So you can let go of the fear and just rest in that experience. So that's a sign that you're touching on experientially the emptiness. Another sign, of course, is that when you actually come out of the meditation, if it's a bit of a stronger experience, when you come out of the meditation, you'll notice something a little bit different for a short time. You'll notice that things seem to be, soft is not the right word, but there doesn't seem to be this harsh boundaries to everything. Everything's more fluid, and you'll feel a little bit more connected and so forth. So these are signs after the meditation that you had some sort of deeper experience of emptiness. But in the practice, if you really get a deeper experience of emptiness in the practice, then like the musician, there was just the music playing, that you'll find that in that experience there will be this experience of spaciousness and of absence, and the sense of me having the experience will really drop away a lot. In fact, in a direct experience, there's no sense of me whatsoever in that experience. There's just the experience of emptiness happening. So if it's a deeper experience, you'll find that, often people they do this practice and then they have some spacious experience and they go, oh, I'm realizing emptiness. No. Because that I'm realizing emptiness often is this self-grasping. So, often people feel, I'm directly realizing emptiness now. That's 100% proof you're not. If you have the thought in the meditation, I'm directly realizing emptiness, that's 100% proof you're not.
Who is the observer?
Right, so that's going to be the next topic. Maybe I can bring that in now before lunch. I wanted to. So what we're saying here and then is that when we look for this me and we don't find, then that's a realization of emptiness or an experience of emptiness. Meaning there's no independent findable me. So who is the me? Who's the observer? Who's the meditator? Like everything, the me is a dependent me. The me that exists depending on causes and conditions, parts and labelling. So to understand that, again, maybe we'll go back briefly to the pen. Normally we say, this is a pen, or the pen is the collection of these parts. But remember, yesterday we said the pen is something labelled depending on the collection of the parts. So there's no pen to be found here. The pen is just labelled depending on those collection of the parts. Similarly, the person, this is not the person. The person is not the collection of the body and the mind. The person is labelled depending on the body and the mind. That's the dependent me. That's the me that exists. That's the observer or the person or whatever. Now, that relates to the idea of there's always a question of what goes from life to life, So any tradition that talks about something after this life has to sort of posit how that occurs, From a Buddhist perspective, the question is a bit, what's the word? The question itself is misleading. Because when we say what goes from life to life, that implies there's something here that is moving to here. But even if we forget about what goes from life to life, but even if we look at the physical world, is there anything that goes through time in the physical world? Is there anything that moves through time in the physical world? No. There's just a flow of change. Often, and this is when we look at impermanence in a very simplistic way, we have this idea, and this is often how it's explained. Often we say we have a thing that in the next moment it changes. And in the next moment it changes. That's how it's often simplistically explained, that in one moment, in the next moment, it becomes something else. So is there a thing that in the next moment becomes another thing like this? Is this impermanence? No, can't be. Can't be. Because if we talk about a moment being a certain length of time, then during that length of time we're saying there's a static, stable thing there, which is not physics. That there's just a flow of change. So impermanence is this constant flow of change. So superficially, it seems like this pen is moving through time. But if we look closely, there's no pen moving through time. There's just a flow of change. And in that flow, it's useful to label pen at certain stages of the flow. And then later, maybe we label, other things when it's breaking down. So therefore, actually, when we talk about what goes from life to life, it's sort of leading us down the wrong way, hoping to find something that is moving through time. And like physics, also in Buddhism, everything is flow and change. There's no one stable, static thing that jumps through time. So based on that, let's have a look at what we mean by the person and what goes from life to life then. So let's assume this is our life, and this is the body. And then we have the mind. So the body also is not moving through time, it's just continuous change from fertilized egg, a lot of change happening in the life. The mind is not a thing moving through time. It's also a flow of mental experience, constantly changing. And on that flow of physical change, we label body. On that flow of mental change, we label mind. Fine. And then on those bases, let's say this is the present moment, we can label person. So person or me or whatever name you want to give now is something labelled on the basis of the mind that exists now and the body that exists now. That's the me that exists now, is simply a me merely labelled on that. That's the me, that's the observer, that's the whatever name person you want to give. So that's the person. And of course then at every point in our life, the me that exists is the me that is labelled on the basis of whatever the body is existing now, the mind that is existing now. So the person is not the body and the mind, just like the pen is not the collection of the parts. And so we can do that our whole life. And then when we come to the end of this life, then from a Buddhist perspective, in the death process, we go through certain stages. And there are 4 stages, initial stages, where this body is slowly shutting down. So during those 4 stages, this body is still active, it's slowly shutting down. This mind is still active, it's slowly shutting down. So the person who's undergoing these first 4 stages is the person that's labelled still on the similar body, similar mind. Then at the end of that 4th stage, this coarse body shut down. Heart stopped, brain activity stopped. But then over the next 3 stages, we have the subtle, so this is coarse body and mind. We have the subtle body and mind over the next 3 stages. So the subtle body and mind, the subtle body is the subtle energies in the body. And we talk about channels and chakras and so forth. And then the subtle energies moving there. And then on that basis, we have the subtle mind that is connected to that subtle body. And over the next 3 stages, this subtle body and mind are slowly shutting down. So the person who's undergoing that stage of the death process is a person labelled on the basis of the subtle body and subtle mind. So of course that person is no longer human. It's still a person, because we talk body and mind, but it's not human anymore. Then the last stage is called the very subtle stage. And then we have a very subtle body and very subtle mind. The very subtle body is a very subtle wind energy, and associated with that is the very subtle mind. So the person here is labelled on the basis of those two things. Then in the next moment, this continuum of mind disconnects from this coarse body and then moves into what's called the intermediate period. It's a period between this life and next life, in Tibetan called Bardo. So in that Bardo period, we take on a subtle body and a subtle mind. So the Bardo person or being is someone labelled on a subtle mind and subtle body. Then at the end of this Bardo period, when we connect with the next life, and let's say we're human, then the mind connects with the fertilized egg in the womb. So that's the basis for the coarse body. And then we have slowly the coarse mind. So then we have the person is labelled on the basis of the developing embryo in the womb and the mind that is associated with that. So at all these stages, we talk person. The basis of the person changes. I mean, even in this life, the body and mind are changing, but through this process, the basis of the body and mind change quite dramatically. So, therefore, when we talk about what goes from life to life, the way the question is asked can be misleading. It sort of assumes, oh, there's one thing here in this life that jumps to the next life. This is not what's happening. There's just the flow. But if we want to answer that question, then the answer is... Often the answer you'll hear is the mere I. I meaning person. Mere meaning merely labelled. So it's the... Mere means only. Mere I means the dependent me, the person that is merely labelled. So, of course, at all of these stages, the person that exists and that is moving, well, again, it's misleading to say moving or going because it seems like there's a static thing that jumps, but that's not the case. But so we can say that at all stages we can talk about the person, the me, the mere I, that's labelled on the basis that is present at that time. So that's sort of the Buddhist answer.
It's kind of the soul. It's like a soul, like a...
So, again, often then people ask, well, what does Buddhism say about soul? Then, of course, to answer that question, I would have to ask you, how do you define the word soul? Because I think in many traditions they use words like that or something similar. And then often they throw these words around without understanding what that means. So, if your idea of soul is something like this, then sure. But
so the Jews say quite the same thing about, I think, no?
I don't know. I don't know.
When they look for the next Dalai Lama, for example, things like that, it's a little different. I imagine
No, it's the same. Same concept, same thing.
So it's on base of what they're looking for the next. Is that when you become more advanced in the spiritual path through the shamatha and Vipasana practice in particular, where we're stabilizing our mind, more clear, more focused, less mental afflictions. When that happens, the power of the mind, I mean, it's not increasing, we're starting to realize the power of the mind that's already there. Now, the power of our mind is limited because of our dullness, distraction, our mental afflictions. Once we start to get rid of that, then the power of the mind becomes immense, to the point where we can, at a very subtle level, connect to the minds of other people. And so someone who is quite advanced in the spiritual path has this capacity, and usually they have other people around them at similar levels, and they can sense, they can know. So these highly advanced practitioners, when someone goes through this process, they can know through their direct experience where that mind stream has ended up through their ability. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the mind? what is this?
The mind is merely labelled on the basis of the moments of experience. Just like the body, this is not the body. The body is merely labelled on the collection of this stuff.
The body is matter changing.
It's matter and energy.
Like if you want to define
Yeah, so mind is mental experience changing. So it's mental experience changing. There's a flow of mental experience, thoughts, emotions. That flow is labelled mind.
I'm just trying to digest that you say that it's not physical at all.
Sure. Like, a simple way is to look at your own mind.
You say there is a coarse and a subtle and a very subtle. So these are material
No, it's just level of mind. Level of mind. We often say we have very coarse thoughts and more subtle thoughts, deeper. So it just means deeper level. So we have this in our daily life.
But we still speak like coarse or deeper, or
Sure.
like those are things that relate to space and material.
No, not necessarily. No. I mean, for example, when we become concentrated, we say we have a deeper level of concentration. No? It's the same mind.
I'm not thinking that it's deeper, but we use those words and like.
Yeah, you can use those for physical things and mental things. No problem.
This is Vipasana. I would love you to explain a bit more about the mirror eye that stays through this all.
Stays. Well, nothing stays.
The mirror eye that could be recognizable through. What do you mean?
Well, recognizable. The person that exists now. This mere eye is not. You can't find it.
Yeah.
Like nothing is findable, and that's why everything exists. There's no pen to be found here, and that's why pen exists. Yeah. Isn't it? I mean, is there a pen anywhere here to be found? No. But it exists because it's dependent on other factors. It's a dependent pen.
Yes.
Same with person. Is there a person to be found here?
So you're saying that the mirror eye doesn't exist?
It does exist, it's not findable.
Great, okay.
So we can't point and say that's the thing that goes from life to life.
I get it.
It'd be like saying, there's the pen. Pen is just labelled on that basis.
Right.
Person is labelled on this basis.
But basically there's a stream.
Stream, yeah. Right. Just like there's a stream here. There's a stream, and in that stream, it's useful to label pen in that stream, and then at some point in the stream, it won't be useful because this will break down and we'll label something else in the stream. And before we labelled something else, but it's a stream. Same here, it's a stream. Yeah, someone over there, yeah.
On the Bible stage.
Oh, we've run over time for lunch. Very quick.
You use the word on the Bible stage. Also, you use the word body. And so if you can elaborate more, because what I experience in now, that it's a certain level of very, very delicate level of the mind. That in the
Subtle, and subtle body. So the subtle body is energy.
You call it body?
Body, yeah.
But it's related to the subtle.
Yeah, it's body. Body.
Of mind.
Yeah, because energy is physical.
Yes.
But it's not this. It's not this stuff. Yeah.
So you call it subtle body.
Subtle body. Yeah, it's just basically. They often talk about in the Bardo state that the beings have like a body of light, of energy. They don't have blood and bones and things.
Because it's very difficult to explain to other people.
Sure, of course.
Not Buddhist, how in this stage of the Bardo, it's still changing of mind, okay, of
Sure.
subtle mind.
Sure.
But it's hard to explain that this subtle mind, what it's doing in this Bardo state, and how it's reached the new circulation.
Sure. Of course.
I can explain it. Even I myself explained with my mother. I saw how is this subtle body I feel, because I know to feel energy. I can explain more than that, and I also met people that can tell me all their experiences from previous life. And I experienced it a lot with the rules, with many people, with this teacher.
Sure.
But I can't explain to people how it's.
Yeah. I mean, of course.
How is this subtle mind?
I mean, it's difficult because we're talking about a completely different level of mind. I mean, it's even like anyway, we'll leave it there because there's a lot to be said because we've run over time. It's lunchtime, so let's break for lunch. Come back at 1:30.
Thank you.